I do want to go back to hope, though, because hope changes. Hope has to change when you come to hospice care, and it really is about how do I hope to have the best life possible for the life that I have left. That's what hospice care is about.
So this one's absolutely personal for me. It's been about 3 months since I lost my father, Jon Caldara, and it was well, we've all been through it or will be through it. I was just absolutely touched by the process that happened at Denver Hospice, and I wanted to come on and talk with Melinda Egging, the president of Denver Hospice. Thanks for being here.
Thank you for having me.
All right. First and foremost, everyone in my family wanted to thank Denver Hospice for not what you did for Dad, but what you did for all of us. I've never been through hospice. I've never been through the experience of hospice. I'm not the kind of guy who says, it was beautiful, but actually it was beautiful. And first of all, give us a definition of hospice. Let's start off from the very beginning.
Starting from the beginning, hospice really is a model of care, and it is to care for those that are facing a life-limiting illness. And that's usually in the last 6 months of life. And I think one of the things that you just said is important in hospice. It is about the patient, but it's also about those around the patient, because that illness impacts the patient and everyone around them, and they're going through it together.
All right, so you used whatever your wording is. I'm gonna translate it into ugly, John-like wording. So you said 6 months. Basically, you take care of the final stages of life. That when someone is dying, they still need to be cared for, they still need to be comforted, but there is no hope of recovery when they go into hospice. Is that, I mean, I know some people come out of hospice. I get that. He's not going just as fast as we thought. But the idea is, the treatment you give him is not to cure him, but to make him comfortable. Is that the best way to put it?
It's fair to say it is not to cure. It is to provide care and comfort. I do want to go back to hope, though, because hope changes. Hope has to change when you come to hospice care, and it really is about how do I hope to have the best life possible for the life that I have left. That's what hospice care is about. And so our hope can shift. Maybe we were hoping for a cure. Maybe we were hoping to get better, hoping to be able to go back to work, hoping to make it to whatever is in front of our lives. But now we will just shift our hope.
Now, our situation, probably like many of the situations you deal with, my father made the decision. He said, I've had enough. And the last few years have been tough. It's been painful. It's been hard living. And he said, no, I'm going to stop treatment, and I'm going to die. And it was a remarkable decision that he made. It was a very empowering decision he made. And for the last week or two, we were at Denver Hospice. My father was calm. He was happy. He was not angry. I'm 57. I've never seen my old man like this. No, there was something about how he accepted it and the people around him that made it a very beautiful ending to his life. I still wish it didn't happen. I wish that the last couple of years weren't tough. But the care you guys gave him was unlike what we've seen, because we've been through hospitals. And hospitals are hospitals. There are great people in hospitals, don't get me wrong. But there was something different about the nurses and the caretakers at Denver Hospice. And try to explain, why was it different?
I think,
you know what I'm talking about.
I think I do, and I agree. There's wonderful medical staff in nursing homes, in hospitals, in so many different settings. And I think what makes hospice workers unique is they really do talk about this, being called to this work. They feel that way, whether it was a personal experience with a loved one, and And we have staff who both had a loved one in hospice and those who did not. But they do feel called to this work. They really find, and we really do find, it's important. It's an important journey to take, and it's important that people do have a beautiful death and that they're comfortable.
So I talked to one of your nurses. She was a younger nurse, and we were chatting, and I said, why in the world are you doing this? You know, it's got to be tough. And she admitted, yeah, it's tough because, you know, at the end of the day, you grow attached to people, and they don't get better. They die. And she said, I got into nursing so that I could do this. And it was such a different answer. I think I've told you before, I've got a friend who was a nurse and an ICU nurse. And I asked him, why would you want to do this work? And he said, oh, I just love it because I've been able to take people near death and bring them back. He told me a graphic story about a motorcycle accident. The guy was held together by pins and rods being shoved through the bed. Mm-hmm. But 6 months after the ICU, he was able to roll himself out, basically. He was going to survive. He said, that gives me, you know, that charges me. This nurse at your place said, no, this charges, you know, I went to school so I could be around dying people. Help us understand that because I'm not made of that stuff.
Maybe you are. Maybe we all are, because we all are there and we all want to be together as a family when someone is born. But we also want to be there when we know someone is really ill. And so how do I hold that space with that person I love and care for them? We want to be comfortable. No one wants to be in pain on any given day, more or less when we're dying. And so how do I bring that comfort? How do I make sure that that life is honored and respected and held in that place so that family can be present, that person can be with their loved ones? That feels like a very high calling.
I know that hospice isn't a place. In my head, it's still a place. Hospice is a type of care. And so a lot of times the work you guys do is at someone's home, not at your facility.
Correct.
And so the key goal, it seems, keep the person comfortable.
Correct.
All right. The emotional side of this is different. You know, so there's my father. He's laying in bed, and for the first couple of days, he was, for the most part, well, first of all, he was very content. He was ridiculously content. Your results may vary, but he was very content. And but everybody's rooms seemed to have a different sense to them. Later on, when he was kind of going in and out of consciousness, we noticed the guy next door, we had just close family, just immediate family. The guy next door, it was a frat party going on. So I think it was a firefighter, and he and his buddies were there, and the whole team was there, and they're spilling out, and they're coming in with kegs of, not kegs of beer, but, coolers full of beer, and they're loud, and they're having a great time. So, oh, are we bothering you? It's like, no, you're not bothering us at all. And so how different is this experience?
I think it is very different and very personal to each person.
Because
Yes.
you go to dialysis, everybody's getting the same treatment. You know, it's time for your chemo. Everyone's getting the same type of treatment. This one, not so.
Right. What is the same is the desire to keep someone comfortable, manage their symptoms, their physical symptoms. They can also make sure that we have emotional support, spiritual support in place, but everyone's reaction and how they process this as a family or a friend, a loved one, is different. We've seen celebrations. We've even had weddings at our care center. And so you have this celebratory experience, you have very sad and quiet and somber responses. Sometimes we see anger, sometimes...
Sometimes you see it.
Sometimes.
I would think that's a near given, isn't it?
It does happen, and there can be a lot of anger for different reasons, whether it's anger at the disease, anger at the experience with healthcare that led them to this loss or anger within the family units and the support systems, angry with each other for decisions that were made or not made. And so all of this is an important time to acknowledge those feelings and see if we can't work through them and come together and make this the best experience we can for the person that we're around.
The night before my father died, and he was there for nearly 2 weeks, I decided I think I should swing by. And he from what I could tell, he was not there. He wasn't, he was still breathing, but he just wasn't there. And I walk into the room. This is, again, a very personal thing. And there's some woman in a wheelchair sitting in my father's room. And, of course, the hair in the back of my head goes up. And I'm like, what the hell are you doing? You and my father. What is going on here? This is an absolute violence. What? And, but I didn't say that. I said, hello, who are you? And she introduced herself. I said, and what do you do? I'm a volunteer here. I just spend time with people, talking with them or holding their hand. Of course, when she said that, I felt like this tall afterwards. But we had a wonderful conversation, and there was somebody there when the family couldn't be to make sure my dad wasn't alone. That was so important to me. And it just kept hitting me. You volunteer for this. You wheel yourself in and volunteer to comfort dying people. You have volunteers. How many volunteers?
We have about 300 volunteers.
300?
Yep. Yes. And so our volunteers help us with so many different things. We're very blessed. Our volunteers, some folks are not comfortable at the bedside and might help us put together packets of information, paperwork, what have you, in an office setting. But most of our volunteers are there for the patients and the families.
What draws them in?
Again, another experience that they had, and they really have a desire to give back and to have that great experience experienced by somebody else that is also going through.
Can anybody just come in and volunteer at the Denver Hospice?
We have a training program, and we do criminal background checks and a lot of those type of things, which might surprise people, because why can't I just go volunteer? So
some training, so that I don't say the things that I would want to say. The Monty Python jokes would not come flying out after the training.
Hopefully not.
All right.
But
no,
yes.
They probably still would.
Right.
No, but it was really pretty amazing. And the facility itself was wonderful. You've got a veterans wing as well.
We do.
Tell me about this.
The Bill Daniels Veterans Wing, I think that is important. We serve so many veterans in our hospice, and we are also one of the few hospices in our state that go through a program with the National Hospice Program, Palliative Care Organization, to make sure we're meeting the needs of veterans. The
term palliative care, these are terms I was unaware of. Palliative, if I get it right, is something like hospice, but it's like, we're not treating your cancer anymore. We're just helping you have a good day.
So palliative care, one of the distinctions between someone who's just on palliative care and not on hospice care is they may still be seeking curative care. And they have a palliative specialist that is there to help manage those symptoms.
Too fuzzy for me. Help me understand. So if I'm fighting cancer, I want to stay alive, and I have a palliative care expert with me, what is that person doing?
That palliative expert is really about symptom management. They are really making
Shouldn't our regular doctors be doing that?
Sometimes it can be a struggle. There can be real challenges with the various medication protocols that people may be on as they're seeking treatment. And so a palliative specialist really does help with that, as well as just helping families talk through and process advanced care decision-making. And so palliative specialists they're just that. They are experts in their field.
It's another thing a conversation I had with the same nurse. I said, well, wait a minute, you wanted to do this? And she said something to the effect of, I get to be a nurse here. That is, I do what the doctor tells me to do if I'm a nurse at a hospital, And I try to do it the best I can. I listen to the patient and try to help, but the treatment is there, and I have to get the treatment. Here, I'm just for the patient. So I'm there, and the patient is king, and I'm there to nurse that patient. And it seemed as though I've heard the same thing from teachers who have left the government system of schools to go to a private school because they can say, yeah, I get paid less, but I get to teach here. I'm going to be a teacher instead of filling out the forms. I kind of got the same feeling that it was, the goal was different.
The goal is different, and we do.
The customer is different. Maybe that's the way to put it.
Customer, that's a strange word for us, but it is different, and it is a very pure form of nursing. Our nurses do get to be at the bedside. They're not running from one light to another in a hospital setting. They're getting to spend some time at that bedside. Yes, they do have to answer a light and go to another place, but it's a much different experience for our staff. And I think what I hear from them is how rewarding that is, to be able to spend time, get to know the person in front of them, get to know their families, and be there for that journey.
You bristled at the term customer. But we free marketeers, we kind of think of it this way. So my father, was he a customer?
Yes, I'm bristling at that word.
Why so?
Probably it's just a term where we don't use in hospice. It really is our patient, it is someone's loved one.
See, I like the term customer because the customer is always right, and that you strive to satisfy a customer.
Sure.
In the same way, your hospice, Denver Hospice, is different than other hospice care in that you're a not-for-profit organization.
We are.
And that's not the case for a lot of hospice services. And I had this conversation with one of your employees, and basically she said, I've worked in private hospice. I enjoy this much more because there isn't, how to put this in a polite way. So in a restaurant, if times are busy, you need to turn over the tables. And there was a sense of you got shortened care in hospice, that instead of taking you this far before you die, we're only going to take you this far. Or if it's a little, because it's not an exact science when you're going to die, it's not a bus schedule. It seemed like it was much more, restricting in the private hospice. Talk to me a little bit about that. What makes it better to be a nonprofit, or worse?
Working in a not-for-profit, I strongly believe in non-for-profit hospices. And there's a key difference in my mind in that anything that we make a profit or have any extra, we reinvest those funds back into our care, back into our community, and we add on to the services. So it's not just the bare bone minimum requirement from some government agency, but what else can we be doing? What else can we do to enhance that care? And so that's a key focus for us. And I think that shows up by even having an inpatient care center. There aren't that many inpatient hospice care centers in Colorado.
What do you mean inpatient hospice care? That someone is dying, often you will either go out to their home,
right,
or they'll come into the facility. Mm-hmm. Is that about 50-50 or?
No, the majority are in the home,
really?
Absolutely. But having that option of an inpatient care center, every one of them in the state of Colorado are being run by nonprofits.
Really, because it was crucial for us. Mom has been working with this for years. She needed some relief. Right. And the last thing she or Dad wanted were a bunch of people in the house. So by having the facility, it made such a difference. And so Mom was well rested, Dad was well taken care of, we could take a breath. So all the in-person hospices in Colorado are not-for-profit?
I wouldn't say that, no. The majority of hospices in Colorado are for-profit.
Okay.
But the hospices that have inpatient units
that's what I mean.
Are not-for-profits, strictly.
And why is that?
I think that there's a real investment to stand up an inpatient unit. and to have that staffing. How many people are we going to have today? What's that look like? There's a real commitment. It's a financial commitment to your community when you have an inpatient unit. And you said a magic word to me. It was crucial. It was crucial to your family.
Yeah.
And what we hear from family members who do have care there, I don't want to go back to the hospital. I can't do this at home. There's a place for having an inpatient unit for families and patients to be cared for. And so we're very proud of that commitment to our community to have that. And I really do think of it as a crown jewel of hospice care.
Having gone through it, I couldn't agree more, and I hope folks can contribute tax deductible to Denver Hospice. It really is remarkable. It's one of those things, kind of like when my child got sick, I didn't know what a jewel or how important Children's Hospital is, but when you need it, I'm so glad that somebody years before decided to do it. Let me ask you some of the more difficult things. My father died pretty slowly. Some people want to die faster. Colorado has not assisted suicide, but we have the ability for self-administered, I don't know what it is, medications to kill you. How does that work in hospice? I know by Colorado law, you have to be able to take it yourself. You have to be able to put it into your mouth and take it. How often is that employed?
I think each hospice is going to have a stance around medical aid in dying. That's how we refer to it in Colorado. And so we do see that in the Denver Hospice, where there are patients who, they run the spectrum. I just want to know about the law and what my options are, and they ask about it and they never proceed. And some do proceed with going through the steps, even to the point of obtaining the medication, but never take it.
I heard a statistic that something like half of the Coloradans that get the medication to die don't take it.
Yes.
I kind of understand that, but I also understand I want it there if I want it. I don't want to wait to get a prescription filled.
Right.
There it is. Your staff cannot help with that.
We cannot self-administer. It has to be self-administered by the patient, but that is the law. So we're not going to have our staff providing, injecting, having someone drink. It has to be self-administered as part of the Colorado law.
There's a dying process, and I remember when we got the word that my dad was actively dying. And what I heard by that, again, you have nicer terminology than I have, but what I heard was, there's no turning back now. There's no way. I mean, at first, I'd say, Pop, are you sure this is what you want? And he was like, yes, I'm sure this is what I want. I'm not going to do any more treatments. I'm not going to fight this infection. I'm checking out. But that time from when we got the word, no, he's actively dying, and it is an unpleasant thing to be around. I've been around it before. The labored breathing, the gurgling of fluids in the lungs, and you're wasting away because you're not getting nutrients. And it seems to me like you're starving to death. Is that right? Are you starving to death?
No, your body is changing, and your body has different requirements. The athlete that's in the Olympics, his caloric need is probably very high. They're running a marathon, they're doing so much. When we're at our end of our life, our body has changed, and our need for fluids, our need for different calories has changed and decreased.
Then what do people die of?
Well, inevitably everyone's heart stops, right?
Let me try that again. It seems to me that a lack of nutrition comes in, and the body starts failing for lack of fuel or lack of fluids, or
You'll even see, let me back up, where people don't even want the fluids or want the food. And again, your body's need has gone down for what it needed when it was once healthy. And maybe it is a cancer diagnosis where the cancer has advanced and metastasized. That has changed the body. Maybe it's advanced heart disease or advanced lung disease. Our bodies have changed and they are starting to shut down.
That period of active dying seems painful and it seems cruel. At least when watching it, I was like, I don't want him to die. I don't want him to die. I want him to die. It was that, and you must go through this all the time. It's like, why? Is he in pain during that?
Our goal would for someone to never be in pain. And even for the labored breathing that can happen, our respirations slow down, right? They can become heavier. But are they easy? Or are they struggling? And if they're struggling, how do we treat that?
How do you know if they're in pain or not when they can't talk to you?
So we look for physical signs and symptoms of pain. And so there's, whether it's the facial grimacing or if someone's reacting or tightening up. And so we look for various ways that a person will tell us in a nonverbal way that something isn't right.
So it takes time to learn how to read this.
It does.
So the nurse right out of school might not be the best person until they've been around it often enough.
So every hospice has a training program to really recognize these signs and symptoms of impending death, what to expect during that death process, and how to treat that process.
I was told that hearing is the last to go, which is funny because it seems like one of the first things to go as you get older, but that you have this person who seems very unresponsive, but the nurses told me, no, he can still understand you, which is why I made it important to talk with him or talk to him. How do you know that?
Well, we have had patients who, you mentioned, he seemed in and out of consciousness. And when someone was out of consciousness, we want you to talk to them. We do believe they can hear. And then sometimes what's happened is people come back into consciousness and have shared what they've heard. Okay. And so clearly they were still here when we thought they weren't.
All right, let's switch from getting up to that point to the point after. That is awful. All right, Dad's not suffering anymore, but the rest of us are. All right, I lost my daughter to cancer, and still 20 years later, I'm still dealing with this, and so it seems like hospice ends. Father dies, terrific. One more satisfied customer. Put the sign out. Billions served, and then off you go. But that's not actually true, is it? It's
not for hospice. Hospice continues with the family with bereavement support and care that's available. And so those bereavement services can vary from hospice to hospice, but all hospices must offer that bereavement support to the patient's family. And so if I think that's really important, especially now as we're moving towards the new year. Different things can trigger and bring up those memories, which can be painful for us as we experience that loss. And so seeing a grief counselor is something that hospice should be able to provide.
If someone's dealing with grief right now, but their loved one didn't go through Denver Hospice, can you still help?
We can. So at the Denver Hospice, we not only serve the patients or the families of our patients, but we also serve the community and have community grief support for them as well.
What does that mean?
So we have members of the community that reach out. Maybe they lost a loved one who wasn't even on hospice at all, or was in a hospice in Iowa, but they're here and they're hurting. And so at our hospice, we can provide individual grief counseling. We also have group classes and group therapy sessions. And we also have a special program just for children.
And when I lost my daughter, there was something called the Butterfly program, and I'm trying to remember which hospice did it. I don't remember because somebody who had their stuff together better than I did said, here, you're going into this every Wednesday. Okay, thanks. And it was remarkably helpful. So what happens at that grief counseling? What you can just talk to your buddy. What does a grief counselor get you?
It's not a magic pill or a magic wand, but it is about looking at that grief with that person and looking at how they might employ different techniques, different tools to work through that grief. And that's important. So many times we get so uncomfortable around grief. We get so uncomfortable around death. And let's not even bring up that person's name, or let's put it on a shelf somewhere. But really, that's not the right answer for many people. They do need to talk about it. They do need to share about it and to experience and share that with another person. Grief counseling allows
The thing I learned about grief is that it is not the same for any two people. It does, and that it manifests so differently. It's like no wonder couples who lose a child get divorced so often, as we did, is that you grieve in such completely different ways. One processes it by shutting up and being alone. The other one processes it by talking and being with people, or whatever it is. It's very unique, and this is what I really hate about grief. And tell me that I'm not right on this one. It's on its own schedule, and what sucks is the rest of the world is not comfortable with your schedule. It's like, it's time to move on.
Right.
So grief lasts what? 3 weeks? That?
I think it lasts your lifetime. It lasts your lifetime. You've always had that loss in your life. How you respond to it will change. How you work through it may change, but that loss is there. You mentioned your daughter from 20 years ago, and I'm so sorry for that loss, but that's real.
But it's also something that turns beautiful over time. Mm-hmm. And when I talk to recently grieving parents, I try to get this message out that as much as it hurts now, and it's going to hurt for a long time, and it's going to change, and you go through this, at the end of this tunnel, there's a real warmth to it, a real memory. Thinking of that person brings warmth, not pain. Right. And that, I think, is the end of it. You mentioned kids. You give services for dying children as well. Talk to me about that.
We do. So at the Denver Hospice, we serve over 60 children, unfortunately, every day. And that can be in
60 a day?
A day, on any day. So that could be in a palliative care program, that they're not quite ready for hospice, but they have a very serious illness and they need palliative care specialists to help with what they're going through. We have children on a Medicaid waiver program, and then we have children in hospice services.
Wow.
We all wish that children would never leave us. It's unnatural. But for me, and I've had clinicians say to me, I could never do that. I could never do that. I could never be someone who provided care for a child. And I think as a mother, as a parent, if I had a child facing serious illness and there were no providers, how awful that would be. And so we step into that space and we do care for children with serious illness. And I'm very proud of the work that is done each day. It's very hard work. And we have a dedicated pediatric team.
I think the same way about the people at Children's and, what it takes to do that work. And I'm so grateful. I mean, I have a son with Down syndrome now, and, it's a lot of tough work. It's like, I'm glad there are people out there to do this stuff. Let's talk money for a second, because services cost money. And we had a situation where we thought Dad was lasting a little longer than his VA benefits were going to allow. And the last thing we wanted was for him to leave Denver Hospice and perhaps go back into a hospital where only one person could see him a day because of these ridiculous COVID restrictions. Instead of having his family around him and his grandkids around him, which is, to die alone is is a cruelty I can't even talk about. But to see someone die in a hospital or in a nursing home and their kids and grandkids can't be there is the height of cruelty. But we were worried that, well, you know, Pop, you're lasting longer than we thought. You know, it worked out, but how is it paid for? How do you make sure that you have this possible? And is there a, hey, you know, at the diner, sorry, you've been sitting here drinking coffee too long. If you're not going to order something, you know, you need to go.
Interesting analogy, but so hospice is paid a set rate, and that's established by the government based on their levels of care that are available in hospice. And out of that rate, the hospice has to manage that person's care within that rate. And
whether it's 1 day or 60 days?
1 day or 60 day, you get the same amount every single day that someone's on service. And yes, there's patients who are going to cost you more than what you are reimbursed. And that happens. And we see that at the Denver Hospice quite frequently. And that is our space as a not-for-profit, to be there for our community. And
if you weren't a not-for-profit, might it be different?
I'd love to say, I'd hope not. But I do know that a particular hospice or hospital was trying to place a patient and had gone to 3 or 4 different hospice providers, and they wouldn't take him. Clearly, this young man, I say young, he was in his 30s, qualified for hospice care. But his medication expenses was double what our total payment was going to be. And we took him, and we cared for him.
So it doesn't matter what medications you're on. Let's say in order for you to, you need X amount of medications.
Sure.
And you're going to keep using those until you die. Once you go to hospice, you don't get reimbursed extra because of those extra costs.
No, there's no extra. It's a set rate. It is a set rate. And I think, you know, families are worried about financials. That is part of the equation, that sometimes when they've been in and out of hospitals, doctor's office, specialists, medical bills are a reality. And with hospice, what is nice is that most patients are on Medicare, and Medicare has a full hospice benefit. The hospice is reimbursed by Medicare, and the hospice is responsible for the items related to that terminal illness.
This is a weird model. All right, let's wrap this up. I mean, most importantly, just thank you, and please thank your staff. It meant the world to us. I haven't used the word dignity, but that's what I worried about the most for my dad. Was I wanted him to be treated with the dignity he deserved, and it's tough when you can't move, when you're soiling yourself, when you're at your very worst. But somehow the people at Denver Hospice did that, and they took care of us. And we are very grateful because it gave us final time with Dad in a way that he needed and that we needed. And so I'm just so grateful that it's there. What's the one thing you need? What is the thing that you need people either to understand or to provide?
One thing I hear from families a lot is, I wish we would have known about hospice sooner. I wish we would have looked at this sooner. So many times, if we do know about hospice, we shy away from it. And over, I wish we would have known, I wish we would have done this sooner. I think that when we come to terms with what is really happening, I would hope that everyone would embrace and make the very most of every moment we do have together in this life.
Let me put it in my terms, which is, it wasn't nearly as scary and as bleak as my imagination thought it would be. That this is the terrible end. Here we have to go through something. And I think it's because that's how we feel with hospitals. I'm sorry, great hospital staff doing great work, but it's not comfortable. It's not comfortable for the family. It's not comfortable for the patient. It's awful. It's just, you want to get out. You just want to escape. Hospice was very different. It was finally time to take a breath and relax. And for that, I thank you.
Thank you.
All right. Take care. Thanks again.
Thank you.
If you enjoyed that conversation, by all means, click one of these other great programs. We have the best conversations with the most fascinating Coloradans. And subscribe to our channel. Just click down below and hit that little bell button too. You don't want to miss a single show.